Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Pate. I am a graphic designer illustrator, and today we have a very special Adobe Pro Tips. So, as everyone's trickling in, I am based out of Los Angeles, California. So, I hope we got some West Coast people sharing their morning with me. But we're going to really be diving into a lot of fun things with Adobe Illustrator and textures. I get a lot of questions about textures. How do you add that to your illustration? How do you make something that might seem a little flat, put some dynamic touches to it? We're going to go through that. We're going to also build these custom brushes. I'm going to show you how these brushes work, how you can customize your own set of brushes. So all these things we're going to walk through. And, without wasting any time, I think we should just go ahead and dive in. So real quick, hi, Tyler Pate. Check out some of my videos if you ever want to see some slower behind the scenes stuff. But here is the fun thing that I prepped for us. I had so much fun putting this together last night because I knew it was going to be so perfect for a flat design going into texture and really showing how that dynamic flow works. So we have our bag of lemons, our bag of oranges. Just to zoom in, this is just our base. So if you're following along or if you want to do something like this, I always suggest start simple. Start with just a couple shapes just to show you what we're working with. That's it. That is all we're working with right now. And it's not that complicated, but what we're going to do is just going to redefine it. So with that said, custom brushes. If you want to know, brushes are, I have them right here to the right. You could have all sorts of variations of these brushes. I'll just use a few to give you an idea of what a brush could look like. These are various thicknesses and randomness with the shapes within that's repeating, right? And you could buy these online very easily, accessible online, but you could also make them. And I'm a huge fan of figuring out how to make these things because it gives us more knowledge on why they are the way they are. And also, it understands why the parameters of those are the way they are. So, with that brush, they actually start like this. Believe it or not, this right here is is a brush, right? Doesn't look like it, but when I said earlier, these are repeated shapes throughout that stroke, this is what it's repeating. So we're going to make one of these real quick just to have reference. That's our old one. I like to keep it a little circular because we're going to have consistency when that stroke happens. So I'm going to start with just creating a bunch of circles. Think of these as like particle dust. That's essentially what we're wanting. So we're going to make a few of these, spread them out, shrink them down, do all this fun stuff like random little pieces that we can kind of build around. And that's going to really help us with a lot of the brush effects down the road. As you can see, I'm going to flip some of these, shrink that down, and just spread them out. Again, making custom brushes, it's going to take a few steps. It took me a few tries to really understand what makes a good brush, because when we're building these and then we get to the process of it being finished, it's kind of hard to adjust it at that point. So you kind of have to start back from the beginning. But what we're going to do is we're using our old brush above as reference. And I'm just going to walk you through exactly how to make these brushes, because these brushes are going to give us all the texture effects we want once we get to our design. Just like this. We'll spread these out, the smaller ones on the outside, just like this. It's really cool. So how is everyone else doing in the chat? Let's definitely check on you guys and see what's new. So welcome. If you're just tuning in, we're making custom brushes and we're going to be adding texture or using these custom brushes as texture in Adobe Illustrator. So that's going to be what we're doing. And it's going to be great because with these texture brushes, and also having texture in Illustrator, it's infinitely scalable. So if you're working in consumer products like I do quite a bit, everything that scales is perfect because you don't know where it's going to go. It could be on a shirt, could be on a billboard. We don't know. So if you could keep it in vector, you have nothing to worry about. So that's always a good thing to think about. And I am just randomizing these shapes. This feels like not a lot's going on, but trust me, it's going to pay off once we move this over to our brush panel. I'm just separating these, making sure that no one point looks the same, even though I am using quite a few of the same shapes. Just randomizing it a bit, right? This should be fine. Okay. So with all of these little particles is what we're going to call them. We're going to select all those. And if you have your brush panel open, we're just going to drag that in. If you don't know, we can go up to window and then you can go down and then you see brushes right there. That's F5 key command on my computer. But when you click on the brush panel, you should see what you have right here. And then we're just going to drag that into that panel. Okay, so you notice this little pop-up that came up. There's a couple different variations that we could do for these brushes because each setting has a different reaction to how it handles these graphics, right? But we're not going to do anything but the scatter brush. Scatter brush is all we need for this, and it's perfect because we just want to have a subtle kind of a noise effect, right? And with these settings, it's nothing crazy. I would always suggest naming your brushes. Let's see, Adobe Live Brush. Let's do 2 because I've already made 1. Okay, and then we see our settings. So we have the size just to see, where it scales when you press down. And if you're using a drawing tablet, I use a Wacom Cintiq, so I'm constantly drawing on a screen, which means pressure sensitivity, which that's huge for anything with a brush stroke, right? So we don't need to really do anything with the size. We'll just do 100 there. And then we can change this to about 10%. That's the spacing between each of these repeated graphics. The scatter is fine. The rotation, we can make that random because when it repeats, it's going to rotate those graphics. So it looks completely random and all custom, which is exactly what we want. I think around there. And again, playing with these settings, I always suggest you got to understand what they do and why. I could go into it randomizing what's the best percentage. Well, best way to know is to really try it. So I always suggest that. One important tip though is for colorization, we want to make sure this is switched to tints. Otherwise, you won't be able to change the color of your stroke, and we got to change the colors. So let's make sure tints is selected there. And I think we're good to go. This looks like everything we need, and we're going to click OK. So time as we mash OK, I hope you notice that in our brush panel, we've got a new brush. It immediately adds itself. Check that out. This is what it's doing. So it's creating this brush. And you see I have a color up here selected. It's creating this brush where it's repeating those same shapes. And I'm going to double click on that again. And then you're able to get back in here. Because something I did mess up on. You know how I was saying rotation? It needed to be not fixed. It needed to be random. Okay, so random is what we wanted. Okay, it's going to ask to apply to strokes. Let's say apply. I'm going to delete these old ones. And then we should be good now. Oh, no, still not doing it. Random. Let's see, what's changed here? Oh, duh. We got to make sure we can rotate these things. It's going to randomly rotate these at around 133 degrees. I think that's good. Okay. Apply. Okay. Perfect. Look at that. So with this new stroke, check this out. It's exactly what we want. It's this noise, it's this grain that we've been wanting, because when you start scaling this down, that looks like that subtle noise. That's perfect for shading. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing for our flat designs that I showed earlier. So thinking about that is what we're going to go for. Okay, so we have a brush. I would also suggest variations of brushes. So imagine having larger particles and graphics within that repeat. Just repeating the same step we've already done, that always really helps. And it gives us some difference with our strokes when we start brushing through. So think about that. Let's get back down to our graphic here that we started with. I'm actually so thrilled by these because this has been a sketch for, man, I had this for months in my notebook, and I was just like, it'd be really fun to play with textures with a very flat design. So really simplifying a bag of lemons or a bag of oranges and seeing what we could do with actual texture within that. And then with that being vector textures, you've got my curiosity. I got to see how we could do this. So I thought this would be a great time to explore that. So we have, I think the lemons we can go for first. I'm just gonna throw the brush stroke above this because I need to change the color. And in my color panels up here, yellow. So this is the yellow, same yellow as I have for the lemon. So it's gonna blend in, right? But what we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust the color to give it a little bit more red, add a little more magenta in there. So that we can start thinking of this as a shading stroke, right? That's what we're trying to do here. Okay, so this will be our underneath stroke, and I'm going to move this out the way for now. Oops. I'm going to select our lemon shape here. And then if you go to your toolbar here, you should be able to see this little icon right under the swatches. It's probably hard to see, but it's right up under your swatches. And what that's going to do when you click on it, it's going to say draw normal, draw behind, draw inside. This little feature, believe it or not, I just found out maybe a year ago. It is the easiest way to start generating, creating clipping mask, and in a fluid, process. I think it's great. Normally, you would have to do a bunch of over and under clipping mask, but this I'm going to do draw inside. So with draw inside selected, we should now be able to just select our brush and then just draw, right? And I think we need to change the color again. So I'm going to do outline. Look at that. It just created the clipping mask for us within that shape we had selected. So that's going to be a huge help for us moving forward. I'm going to reduce the actual stroke weight because we want these particles to be very small, subtle, because we're going to start layering these as we build this, this shading. I'll go in here and adjust my stroke a little bit, give a little more curve to it. So I'm curious in the chat, is anyone familiar with clipping mask, with just drawing and creating custom brush strokes in Adobe Illustrator? Because there's a lot of different ways to do it, and it's always fun to know different processes. But today we're going to show how I like to attempt to make these. Okay, I think that stroke is fine. Let's see if we can start adding some more. There we go. This is what we need. I'm just going to do another one of these. Start layering. Let's do the top portion of our lemon. This might actually be our highlight. So one thing I would suggest is for this top one, let's make it lighter. So let's go on more of a solid white or an off-white, I think would look pretty good. We can repeat this again, like so. Adjust it, our endpoints, maybe even simplify our points. Sometimes we don't need all these little points, and it just helps to simplify, like so. Get that. So we're starting to build these uh, little gradients of texture here, which is really fun. And, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if we can get away with maybe a different color of shading. Maybe, yes, maybe instead of going into the magenta, maybe it's more of like a green. I think the green makes sense. We have a green background already, so let's make that our shadow. Something like this looks really fun. Perfect. So you can see now we're starting to really build these shading devices, lemons, however we want to call these. Draw inside. Let's go ahead and repeat the same step. We can eyedropper tool our colors again. Let's see, trying to find out where we should have our shade texture fall. I think the bottom area is pretty good. Let's do our little highlight. Should be here. We'll just layer these strokes a little bit more just to help build more of that texture. And you know, we could also increase the size of some of these, but for now, I think what we're gonna try to do is stick to um, the same. See, draw normal. Let's do this last little lemon. Same sort of process. Draw inside is what we're doing here with our brush stroke that we did make at the top of the hour. So definitely look back at how we made the custom stroke. Always a nice refresher, especially with some lemons. So I'm just building my shadows. I think the bottom of each of these lemons are perfect for this. And then we're going to do our highlight. Same sort of process. Building the top pieces of these lemons with our highlight, bottom with our darker color. I'm just building it. I'm just drawing it over and over. And just to outline mode real quick, you can see our strokes are still there, all still fully active, able to edit those if we need to. But we're just layering them, which is really, really nice. And you know what? I think to push this a little further, I want to add some shadows and textures to the bag itself. So I'm thinking this is more of a plastic bag, but I've seen some really cool effects with adding noise to these. So draw normal. All right, select the bag. Let's draw inside. Select my brush again. Let's go along the edge here. Let's see. Let's lighten this. Just adjusting the size of our stroke or the width, the weight, width. It's early over here, guys. Okay. I think that's pretty cool. And then we do the same thing on the opposite side, but we're going to make this more of our shadow. Don't worry, I see that's outside of our clipping mask. So we're going to select that, copy, delete, click on what's in our clipping mask, and then Command F, paste into place. Now it's in our clipping mask. That's a quick way that I constantly go in and out of my clipping mask on the fly. Makes it really helpful if you're just trying to move fast. I'll thicken that a little bit. Oops, let's see, delete. Okay, so we're now getting a little close to time. But I do want to try to get to our oranges real quick. But you see this process, I'm kind of repeating everything. There's about 3 steps to this. Making the stroke, that custom brush, right? That's our texture. That's going to be exactly what we're constantly filling in on our edges. And then it is drawing inside of our shapes, essentially just making a clipping mask. Either process works. And then when you're in that clipping mask, we're going to start using that texture brush that we've already developed. And I'm just adding some highlights and shadows to our actual bag. And I think I need to add some highlights. Let's see. This needs to be a highlight. I'm eyedropping tools, some of the previous colors that I've already identified as my palette, just like this. Check this out. I mean, it's so simple, but what we're doing is really changing the whole idea of the dynamic shapes of this thing because it was so flat. It was just the simplest shapes. Adding some textures and layering these textures gives it so much more. And I think that's the beauty of these. And they're all vector. So to jump into these cute little oranges, same sort of process. I'm going to draw inside. Oops, I need to draw normal. Select the orange, draw inside of the orange. And then let's just make it the stroke that we want. Adjust the size. We want these to be a little, the darker stroke. Make that a little smaller. Adjust the stroke down a little bit. So it's on the edges there. I'll even build another one. And then I'll do a highlight. This is my highlight here, which is going to be the opposite. Let's make it lighter. Something like that. That looks great. Even go down on the size a little bit. Just a little more particle dust is what I'm going for. I like the subtle noises. Just a little highlight. Add more. Look at that. And when you start layering these, it's so cool because it just adds so much depth to it. You know, if we go over our darker one, look at that. It makes it feel like the texture of an orange just from a couple brush strokes. And you could do this to each of these shapes. I would probably go into the leaves here and do the same sort of process of better yet, let's focus on that then. The leaf could have some shading. Let's see, draw inside. Zoom in here. See exactly what I'm trying to do. Reduce that. We're going for a green. Let's darken our green a little bit. Something like that. Yeah, so we could go into each individual shape of our graphic if we want. It depends on how much texture you want to use. But it really just helps to be sparingly with this. Use this sparingly because I will say when you start layering a ton of these, you might have some issues. Your file size is going to be massive. So one thing to know about adding these custom strokes, they can be very draining on your work. So just keep that in mind. And there's some ways to use these in efficient ways. Excuse me. Um, we're just going to keep drawing these textures. Just adding some shadows like that. I'm going to even make this a highlight. So let's lighten this a little bit. Oh, that's cool. And check this little guy out. I mean, he's coming along perfectly. What else should we need? I think we could add maybe a little more. Oops. You see how this little rectangle is around the leaf? That means we're only drawing within that shape. So sometimes I have to switch back to draw normal. So we're out of that clipping mask and then we can select the new one. I think we need to add just some texture over his face a little bit. Maybe these are larger pieces. And then we can adjust the color closer to our orange, but slightly different shade. Something like that. Gonna put this in our clipping mask. Something like that. And we're gonna draw inside of our bag again. Draw inside. I'm gonna select that stroke. I'm gonna use our eyedropper tool to go ahead and select the bag color that we've been using, just so we have some consistent illustrations here. And we're just gonna kind of repeat the same steps, but do we have any questions in the chat? Let's see. Looks like we're still good. I mean, thanks again for everyone who tuned in. This is really fun to just talk a little bit about texture brushes, how to make custom texture brushes in Adobe Illustrator. That is such a great thing to say, because I used to only make any sort of texture effect in Photoshop, and to be able to have that in Vector is just such a great thing. Okay, so we made our custom texture brush. We applied it to our flat illustration, and we've already completely changed this illustration into something that feels a little bit more dynamic, colorful, and it's got the shading that we would love to just lean into more. And it's super simple. We're drawing inside using clipping mask. So with that said, I think we're good, and we're gonna probably stop here. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'd love to answer any texture vector questions. But thanks again, and I think I'll catch you next time. See ya.